That was our 15th meeting. And as co-host, I'll be among the last to speak today because I'd like to hear from the folks who were there about what they took away from this meeting. I would like to start with the Dutch because they are very blunt and direct. They
Yeah,
will tell you the things.
and I heard from other participants that they liked the breakout meetings the most.
Yeah.
And my highlight was the presentation by April on real world evidence showing where the money is.
Hmm.
So it gave me a new perspective on how to encourage monetizing by startups. So and also I had a great there was one great um, breakout meeting I had with Jose, and we were talking on where do startups fail on, and then the usual answer is it's either regulatory or reimbursement. But in my humble opinion, it's anything a startup fails on. That's the most important thing for that startup. So it can be either your team or your planning or your funding or whatever. So, and Jose said, well, you can look at it as a bridge. Take one stone out of it and the whole thing collapses. You have to have all stones in place, and then you can have a successful startup. So that was my takeaway.
Uh,
But for those of us that were unable to attend, can you describe the breakout sessions? What was the structure and process of that?
Do you ask me or I think?
Well, anyone who attended. I just
Okay.
it was the first time, I passed the torch this year. I was there and I attempted to not post, but my incessant need for attention led me to hold the microphone at all times and overexert myself. And Sean was very gracious and all but once didn't embarrass me in front of everyone. Uh, so that was good. Uh, Sean introduced something that I had actually only done once, and that was 10X number one in Minnesota in 2013. I attempted to have a breakout where, you could be in one of two tracks. But A, we didn't really have enough people to make it work, I think, really well. And second, I heard from the folks that weren't in my room that it was weaker because the person who was leading that didn't really know how to work a room. So it was very kind of dated. I find very much a function of, the energy of the host and keeping it moving and fluid. Of course, I'm biased. Um, but Sean broke the meeting out into four groups to work on different issues. Jose led one. Uh, Jan, I believe you led one. And
Nelly.
Nelly led one, of course. How could I forget? Um, and it was interactive, and there was a lot of positive feedback about people being able to get to know one another a lot better than they otherwise would, hearing real contributions, real time. Um, so, folks who participated, maybe Jose, tell me
Yeah,
about.
sure. Yeah, I mean, the format to answer your question, Arlen, was, I don't know, about 60 people at the conference. So when we split up, there were about 15 people in the groups, 10, 12, 15 people in a group. And so then that allowed for everybody to sort of make a quick introduction and really participate on a discussion on a topic. So those of us who were hosting it might have kind of queued up, the topic of conversation, and then people might have shared some of their experience around that. For example, the group I led was around software development for medical devices. And so we had some conversations about, the process, the regulations, the challenges, how it interfaces with reimbursement, those various things. The nice thing about it, I mean, really honestly, the best thing about 10X for me always has been the fact that because it's relatively small, you can really meet every single person there, shake their hands, have a quick conversation with them. And so this just facilitated that further. So really got to hear by the end of it, since everybody participated in 4 different breakouts, and there was, kind of an attempt at ensuring that you weren't always grouping with the same people. It really allowed all of us to get some FaceTime and some conversation with pretty much everybody at the conference. So, as is usually the case, I walked away feeling like I now, there's many people there whom I already knew. I know them a little bit better now. And then many people there whom I didn't know. I feel like now I know who they are, what they do. Um, not just from a business perspective, but a little bit on the personal side. So I would say I liked it. I thought it was good. It was a little bit of, rocky, right? Because it was first time and figuring out the logistics and the
I was
first breakout
scared.
session. It was like 4 groups in one room. So sometimes hard to hear by the middle of it. Some of us started going outside, so there was less noise to contend
And
with.
everyone was going outside.
And
The
then
first
everybody
person
went,
who
they
said, I'm
screwed it
going
up because then
outside got
again you
an
couldn't hear.
oversized group relative to the others. Everyone's like, I'm going, I don't care what it is, I'm sitting outside.
Yeah,
So that
that's
was
nice.
nice.
You know, I think Matthias said it really best last night. What I liked about the breakout groups is sometimes we had an agenda and it deviated, and it was because we were having intimate conversation with a small group. And so it could have started one area, but it could have it evolved as part of a natural course because the group was smaller. So I think he said it best.
Um, Arlen, Anthony was to be our um, kickoff speaker, and somehow it fell off his calendar entirely. So at 3 minutes to not, and this he couldn't have been more apologetic. This never happens, etc., etc. Stop nodding your head in disapproval. The point is, he showed up. He rearranged his whole calendar, and he showed up to talk at the end of the day. But it was 3 minutes to 9, and I was like, "You're cutting it kind of close." Text, and he was like in a meeting, and he's like, "What?" It took him like 20, 30 minutes. He says, "Was that today?" Um, yeah. Anyhow, because of that, when he did show, he didn't use any of his slides, and he just sat in front of the room, and we had the best 45 minutes of give and take with him. People asking, because we always run out of time for him. He always has so much to contribute. It's ridiculous. And people are just brimming with questions, and then he's, off saving a child or something. But I learned that not only are you going to be at AI Med, but that you invited Nick Anderson to present. And at the end of the day, we went out to dinner, and Anthony was like, I don't know. I'm like, come on, have one drink. He's like, okay. I said, well, drive me. Everyone else is walking. So we got a little extra time together. And he invited me to come and moderate some sessions, which I will do. So I'll have a chance to shake your
Right.
hand, or if you're a hugger. I don't know if you're a hugger.
So there's 2 points to this. One, I'm a big fan of intimate, instructional and inspirational meetings. Every one of us has been to a meeting where there's 20,000 of your closest friends and nothing gets done. These meetings are great for the reasons that have been mentioned, and the challenges, and I'm opening this question to the group. The challenge for the organizers is, how do you at least break even, if not make money doing it? Because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of money, and if you don't have people registering to keep it small, so how do you make that work other than just raising the price, which then you run
Hard to
into
say that.
elasticity. So how do you do that?
I'm proud to say in 15 sessions, I never lost money, not once.
Oh, good.
I didn't make a fuckload each time, but I didn't lose money, which is good.
Yeah.
I'm encouraging Arlen, who will be our speaker next week, um, to start his own equivalent of a Friday call with his members. And, his folks is the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs. We spoke after last week's call, and he said these are physicians who are looking to um, either have a side gig or are looking to step away from being in practice. And that the folks on this call are the people that he would want to be the featured guests for his call, because I don't know how many of you have had a client who was an aspiring entrepreneur who was a doctor who doesn't know anything about quality management, doesn't know anything about cybersecurity, doesn't know about, regulatory stuff. And so it's like a new awakening. Wow, all of these things I need to take into consideration. So we'll see
Now, thanks
next
for,
week if Arlen chooses to go this route, but I think it would add a lot of value to his members.
well, I started to socialize it in our group, but what particularly I'm interested in from this group is your perspective. In other words, as Joe said, there's an increasing number of physicians that want to supplement their practice or replace their practice with non-clinical roles. Advisors, consultants, members of teams, board of directors, chief medical officer, et cetera. And there are a number of barriers that get into the way of those folks finding jobs with companies like yours or the companies that you work with or for. So what I'm interested in is, from your perspective, from the potential employer or contractor perspective, what do you look for? What are the things that get in the way when a doctor says, I want to work with you? So we can have, that's what I'm thinking about next week. I can tee it up with some stuff, but I'm really more interested in the voice of the customer, and that is you.
Mm-hmm.
What do we need to do to improve the odds of someone being able to add value to whatever it is you're trying to do?
Well, I'm thinking that I don't think of it as them adding value to what these folks are trying to do, but rather whether these folks believe that they can have a successful engagement with
Right.
the folks. So for me, um, if someone came to me with an idea that I challenged them on their point of difference and what's the clinical, operational, financial value relative to what's on the market today, and they're like, I'm like, because I don't want to work on a project that I'm not going to be able to say, I helped with that. I want to put it in my portfolio and say, wow, you worked on that. Not something that just kind of fizzled and it's like, I don't like taking money from someone who I don't think is going to make it. That's me personally. Michelle, I'd like to ask you, um, physician entrepreneur approaches you, says, I have this idea. I don't have a prototype. We haven't raised any money. What do you think?
Send me a retainer. I mean, seriously, like these people, it's a pipe dream and it's hopes and dreams. So, we take them, we do the regulatory pathway assessment. Seriously, though, I take a retainer if they're at that, because I've very often come to find out that they appreciate or they think that they should get certain information for free. So we start them with a regulatory pathway assessment, and then that takes them, they take that and then they use that to go out and raise funds and say, hey, I understand my plan. This is like a legitimate third party opinion on the reality of what my device is and how long it's going to take and how much money it's going to take and those kinds of things. So the smart ones put that in there, the high level information in their pitch deck, and then they give the position paper to serious investors to validate their assumptions that they put in.
It's a good point, Michelle, but it's a two-way street. In other words, I totally agree with what you're saying, but and that's the case of a physician entrepreneur trying to get an idea to a patient and go through the process. But the other scenario is I don't necessarily have an idea, but I think I can add value to your idea. And then the issue becomes, and it's the same conversation. So for example, it's just not me, but let's just use me as an example. So if someone comes to me and says, I have XYZ idea, I've gone through all these steps, but I want you to help me do whatever. And then the issue, and I say, well, send me a retainer. And they say, well, I can't because I'm a startup and I don't have any money. I'll give you equity. Well, that's not going to work.
Right.
So it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
I think
And so I just think if you don't have, like, ask for $2,500, and if you don't have $2,500, even if you just have friends and family or your own money, like, where is this relationship gonna ever go? You know, and how long is it gonna take to get there? And then if you start out like that and you take equity, then they really do take advantage of what they get for free. You know, if you take equity only. So I never do equity only. And there's only a few circumstances in which I've done a hybrid equity and cash. So enough cash to cover my expenses for the project, and then equity to make up with the discount that I gave below my normal rate. And that way the risk, you know, I'm risk neutral. You know, I'm not going to lose money on the project, and then I've got a hope of making, you know, bigger money with the equity one day.
I think well, Sean, I don't know how loud it is there at the airport, but you just wrote me privately. I think that's worth using your outside voice for.
Okay, well, hopefully they won't have any announcements. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Arlen, there was a person named Stephen Flutie Davis who has developed a network for physicians, and it's like Upwork. And people can go in there and they can put in their projects, either as things that they want help with or things that that they're willing to consult on. And you mentioned your doctors, not all of them have an idea that they want to bring to market, but they want to advise on that. So this is the network that he's built for them, where they go, they put their CV up there, their credentials, say what kind of projects they want to work on, and then people developing medical devices go in and say, we want help with this, we want help with that, we can pay this much, or we can pay nothing, or, you know, we can give equity, or, you know, so it is a marketplace for physician entrepreneurs that are interested in consulting with medical device companies. And you should probably connect with Stephen Flutie Davis about that. You know, I happen to agree with Michelle. I think that when people get things for free, they don't value them. Every therapist I've ever had, and there have been a lot of them, has made me pay something, even when I'm not able to pay the entire fee. And I insist that my clients pay something, even if it's a nominal amount, because when people get things for free, and this was my experience with this conference, is they don't show up, they don't value it, and they don't treat you with respect.
Yeah, I know Stephen. He happens to live in Denver. We've had several conversations, and my response to what you said is there are several dating services to do this.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, matching doctors with companies that want them as advisors. Like any dating service, the success of it, in my opinion, has to do with the quality of the people and the know-how and mindset of the people on the dating service. And so typically what happens is that, or what I see is that, first of all, the doctors that want to do this are not prepared to do it. They don't have the knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies to help a company create speed to value. They just think because of the initials after their name and they know how to do nephrology that they're good to go. Well, that doesn't happen. And the other side of the coin is that some people, not all, but many companies that recruit physicians have the same problem. They don't understand the mentality of the person that they're trying to recruit. And at the end of the day, the date fails. So just putting up a matching service doesn't help. It actually gets in the way, and it causes a lot of heartburn and hard feelings.
I happen to agree with you on that, at least on the last aspect. Marketplaces are a risky product for everyone involved. And one of the reasons I've never created one, what we talked about during my panel discussion on marketing was about how we're going to build community going forward, 2025 onward, what that's got to look like, and how it's going to work. And I don't believe just another SaaS product is going to solve that problem. I think that the answer behind the reason why we held this conference in person and called it Humanizing MedTech was the fact that people are only as good as the relationships that they've formed with the other human beings on this planet. And to that extent, when people work together on solving problems, you get much better outcome than when doctors go it alone or anybody goes it alone. So I feel very strongly that, yes, you're correct. You've developed a community of doctor entrepreneurs, but I think it's a question of how do you enrich that group and get those people talking to each other, get those people learning from each other, and get those people connected to other networks, such as our network, the MDG group. Not one of them has shown up here, and I think, my grandfather was a doctor at the Mayo Clinic, and I know something about doctors. So if you need to be the smartest person in the room, that's a problem. And there are a lot of doctor divas out there, not to be rude. However, if that is the case and you're unable to take direction from other people, then it's unlikely that you're going to succeed in a collaborative environment.
Exactly.
And so you have a huge challenge in front of you, which is how do I build community with a group of people who inherently don't get along? The FDA has the pharmaceutical meetings where they get 26 physicians to fight with each other about whether or not a drug is safe and should be approved. And so, two doctors, three opinions.
Aaron, do you have a comment?
Well, I did have a comment because I think we're getting a little bit away from what your original question was. Because you're talking about a group of physicians that want to learn more about doing medical device development. If they realize they need to learn more, as some of the speakers have been saying, I think that's a easier question to approach. If they don't realize they need to do more, then that's, or if they don't realize they need to learn more, then that's kind of a different question. Because they may not understand why they're not doing it. But to go back to Michelle's point, that knowledge that we have, we share freely within this group. And of course, the physicians are welcome to come here. But at some point, that knowledge and the training that's being provided to the physicians to allow them to go into a different job space has value too.
I would say that, well, I could do a count, but maybe over the 15 sessions, maybe we had 50 MDs attend, and they really do seem to get a lot out of these meetings. Do you remember how rich Dr. Martin's feedback was this week? It was fantastic, and he's working on he's a neurosurgeon who is working on a number of projects, among them a way to do, oh, what's the word? It just left me. Laparoscopic brain surgery for tumors, where right now there are products on the market, but they're very hard to guide. And his is easier to guide. And he said that the surface that you can do right now is like this big, but his will allow this much type of thing. So there were so many things that when we had a panel, the last question I said was, I have a question, and that is, Dr. Martin, will you read to us the notes that you took? I wondered what stood out for him, and it was just across the board, a whole bunch of things like, even I tangentially like, yep, I know that. I know a person who knows that. I know that. Um, that were a little new for him. So that was rewarding for me to hear. Nell?
So one of the things I wanted to go back to, what do physicians need to know when they're getting involved? And as part of it, I'm later in the process, in the quality management process, and physicians are geniuses and they have to have that bravery or anything that needs to basically take care of a patient in a way. But when they try to bring that personality into the medical device arena, they get very frustrated because they're not in control of, let's say, the regulatory strategy, the QMS, the V&V. And sometimes their frustration comes out in a manner that's not appropriate, that demoralizes the team. Because these experts, they think my device is ready. It should be able to go out in 6 months. It takes at a minimum 2 years to get a device through everything it needs to get through and the different channels. And so they're frustrated because they're not the expert. My advice to the doctors and physicians who want to get involved later in the process, I'm not in the early stages, but right when you're getting into that stage where you're starting documentation, you're starting requirements documents, your regulatory strategy, you need to trust that the people are experts and have respect for them. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a doctor be disrespectful to somebody on the team because they're not the expert and they're frustrated that it's taking more than 6 months. So that's just some feedback that I can give, and that's just more of a team building perspective.
Andre, I'm curious to know, as a contract manufacturer, how often have you had physicians be your point of contact on a project versus having them find someone who's more of a traditional business person to interact with you?
Yeah, it's very seldom actually, because we typically deal with the engineers and so forth, unless the developer, of course, is the physician himself. But we typically deal with engineering. And there are companies that have physicians that are advisors, but candidly, we don't get much interaction with them. They'll usually come to us if there's a problem, but in the development phase or
Sure.
bringing the product
I
forward.
anticipated that. How about you, Jan, in packaging?
We don't typically deal with physicians at all because they don't touch the packaging. They think everything happens just because of the device. So
Box.
we're working with all the uh, people in the sterile room or the people unpacking it, and doctors really don't care.
Mhm.
So
Jose, I'm thinking you probably do. They come to you with their idea.
I do have to say, I've had doctors come to me and want packaging for their products without anything else going on. And I have to send them out to other people to do the QMSs and
Hmm.
other types of stuff. But
Like, oh, you want to put that in a box? Have you this, that, and that? Have you checked these boxes first? You see what I did there? Jose, do you have?
Yeah, I've probably worked with maybe 8 or 10 doctors in various capacities, oftentimes like chief medical officers of startups or companies. A couple that, I've helped start companies. I mean, my experience has been pretty positive. I think I can definitely appreciate the challenges sometimes of kind of translating between, somebody whose experience is in the medical domain and dealing with patients who can be extremely valuable as like voice of the user and like understand the clinical need of something, but maybe doesn't understand some of the challenges related to engineering or manufacturing or regulations or reimbursement or all that kind of thing. Um, yeah, I haven't had too many. Yes, there's always an ego to deal with, but honestly, that's true with pretty much any kind of person. You always have to deal with egos. Um, but I find that, I don't know, I've always had pretty good relationships with them. And
Yeah. But engineers
the
have
only
a
ones
lot
who are
of
going to succeed are the ones that are humble enough, at least, to say, here's what I'm an expert at, and here's what you're an expert at. And, and you can sort of each side show deference to the other in their area of expertise. And if you can, there's a soft skill required in that, of course, but that's part of the job. I think if you're helping somebody build a company, it's managing those soft skills so that the
Okay.
person.
I temporarily muted you only because I want to get a point in before we lose Sean, who looks like he's online to board. We are going to have a branding change for this regularly scheduled call. This is, in fact, the last MDG premium call on a Friday. And next week, you'll have the first MLV premium call, as Sean has uh, proven to me not only his friendship and stewardship, but desire to continue what we've built here. And so he's your guy when you have a question. Hey, Joe, I was telling the folks at the meeting, I now have a new short code called ZZ Sean, which is a sentence that when someone says, Hey, Joe, I just type in a few characters and it says, You really want to talk to Sean Smith. He's effectively leaving the group now. Um, I want to publicly thank Sean for doing that because, there was a lot of work that brought us to our little family here, and I'd hate to see it wither. Um, and he won't let that happen. So thank you, Sean. Mhm. That's okay. You can stay on mute. Luke.
Yeah, sorry for the background noise. It was dancehall volume earlier, so it's settled down a bit. I wanted to say it's not only about egos, but doctors speak a different language than engineers, and they have a lot of contact. So you either have to have multilingual doctors or multilingual engineers, or they have to have an intent to understand each other. I mean, there's a lot of effort in biomedical engineering and clinical engineering, so that you have people who speak both languages and can be interpreters. But you really have to understand each other. So I think that's more important than.
When I brought that up, I'm actually witnessing the dismantling, or not dismantling, the disruption in a negative way, and that's the reason I brought that up. 80% of the time it's not a problem, but when it is a problem, it can literally dismantle a company. That's my point, is being in there. And so making sure you have those good positive relationships and that you're always relationship building as you're building the company is important, because you don't want to get 2 to 5 years in and have a blow up of some sort that's just because of frustration. That's really where that point was coming from.
Stephanie, it looks as though you have something to add.
Yes, I'm new to this group, and so I think it's been wonderful listening to the inputs you have. My background is process improvement with a really deep coverage in operations and regulatory. I've facilitated many Kaizen events. So that's probably old language. You guys are rolling your eyes going, oh God, not that stuff again. But frankly, I was in orthopedics for over 15 years. And I remember talking to folks about, let's invite the surgeons to the event. And they were, really worried about it. Oh my God, we can't air our dirty laundry in front of the surgeons. They'll never talk to us again, blah, blah, blah. When I finally convinced them to do that, it was breakthrough. We had fantastic events. The surgeons gave us the feedback that, you trusted us enough to come in and talk about this. And they just, loaded us with information, and then we began to build the trusting relationships to even get to videotape surgeries so that we could actually see in action what they were doing and how they were struggling with the instruments and the tools that we made. It was fantastic. So, it really is the language of being able to interpret and have the person that can help everybody interpret, and building the trust that goes both ways. Both of you have things that you're worried about exposing and, what have you. But to me, that's what it was. And we had some amazing breakthrough solutions and discoveries because we worked together and took that leap of faith.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So what I'm hearing is that and experienced is, for the most part, and again, there are two categories of individuals we're talking about. One, clinicians, and when I say surgeons and doctors, I mean nurse practitioners and pharmacists and anybody who's a healthcare professional. I just happen to call them doctors, but that's what it is. And they're trying to get an idea to a patient and they need help to do it. And the second group is they don't have the idea, someone else does, but they want to consult or advise. Two separate tracks. But to Stephanie's point, most of the time, my experience has been that individual companies or founders turn to physicians for two basic jobs to be done. One is, as you mentioned, give us some understanding of workflow and process mapping. Where does this fit in the user experience if we make it, or disrupt it, which is kind of like a death knell? Or secondly, help me understand the market demand. So you're a nephrologist or a surgeon or whatever. Here's what we're coming up with. What do you think? And sometimes that's valid and sometimes it isn't, but those are usually the two sort of major asks. But there's a whole bunch of other asks where it winds up being ask creep. It's what I call ask creep. We want you to help us understand what it's like being an ENT doctor or a neurosurgeon. We have this endoscopic whatever that we're going to use using image-guided surgery in the OR to take out a brain tumor. What do you think? That kind of thing. And then I do that and they say, oh, gee, by the way, can you help us identify a hospital that wants to do a pilot project with my device? Or, oh, by the way, do you know a bunch of rich neurosurgeons who are willing to invest in my company? Or, oh, by the way, are you willing to let us use your stuff that you write to populate our blog? I mean, it gets into ask creep. And so I guess another point that I'm trying to make is you really need to have clear expectations of the deliverables and the timelines and how this is going to work satisfactorily for both sides. This is a temporary gig. We're not hiring you for the rest of your life. We want you to help us get from A to B. And once that's done, we're probably going to say, thanks a lot. We're moving on. And we got to find somebody else with a different skill set. So that's just, maybe I'm talking endlessly about this, but that's what I think.
Well, we invited you to the call. It's valuable to hear.
I do belong to a group that has a really cool part of their conference usually where they'll have nurses or sterile people, and we hire them to look at packages people have done and put them in a room and videotape them and their reactions to it. That's been really cool. But that's only a one-time gig too, so.
I would disagree a little bit with Lek about mindset versus skills. The examples I would give is that, I mean, skills are basically, what are you capable of doing, or what do you know how to do? Can you take out a brain tumor versus can you do some electrical, whatever, in what you're making? But I think that the mindsets, and what do I mean by mindset? It's like, what's your worldview? How do you see the world? How do you interpret the world and everything in it? And that brings to the table, and it gets to the point of how do you find people who know how to be bilingual without an accent? How do you get doctors to speak the same language as engineers or data scientists or chemistry people or PhD scientists? They come with a different mindset. And the reason they come with a different mindset has to do with the culture of their discipline, I believe. You don't get into medical school because you're a creative genius. You get into medical school because you know how to conform and you know how to compete. That's very different in a business. We're asking you to be creative and cooperative and play nice with each other. Doctors don't do that. We don't play nice with each other. So that's a mindset. It's something that's enculturated when you get into that discipline. And it's not our fault. That's what medical schools pick. We pick people who are going to play between the guardrails for good reasons. You might want to move fast, but you don't want to kill somebody. So it's the
Can,
same, it's a different mindset.
can you train them out of that to
Yes,
understand
yeah,
the?
yes, yes. And that's another misunderstanding. That unlike personality, which is usually fixed, the psychologists tell us by the time we're 8 or 10 years old, and there's all these personality profiling and Myers-Briggs and, you know, Enneagram and all that stuff. It's been shown time and time again that there are ways that you can change your mindset, but it's a different process, and there are ways to do it. And
Actually,
that's
you bring up something that's very interesting. One of the doctors that was in our breakout sessions yesterday, we were talking about how to build a team and how to um, do that. And one of the things he said is for his company, one of the first things they did was bring in somebody who did one of those tests and coaching on how to make the team communicate better and work together as a team. And they did that early on. I thought that was kind of brilliant because then all these things that we were just talking about would be not a problem. They would actually be a positive asset because then they blended it like, here's your strength and here's your strength. So that was one of the great things about yesterday's converse, one of the breakout sessions yesterday.
Victoria has a comment. Faison, do you still have a comment? Because you had your hand up and you put it down.
Uh, yeah, sorry. Hi. I wanted to like mention we had experience working with doctors as well. We work on APD dialysis machine. So we were fortunate enough to find a really humble nephrologist who was US trained, had an MD title, and had worked on automated peritoneal dialysis machines in US like Fresenius and Baxter. And then we got a lot of feedback from him on how we can improve our machine and basically how do we make it more user friendly. So I was working with the user manual and the human factors study, how to set it up and how to basically instruct the user on starting the therapy, setting up the machine, going through it, and then you know, getting done with it. So I had like a great experience working with him, and we are still um, working with him and a few other nephrologists as well. We are like trying to incorporate AI into our system and basically making sure that um, it's more user friendly for the doctor who's prescribing the patient the prescription. So we're trying to, you know, make it more user friendly, not only for the patients, but for the doctors who will be working with the patients and monitoring their physiological needs. Just wanted to
Makes a lot
mention
of
that.
sense. And Arlen, I know that you've undoubtedly been called upon as a key opinion leader, which is what we always used to call the physicians that we really wanted to be advocates for us, who would really understand what we're working on. So clearly there's a market for that for your community. So thank you, Faison. And before we move on, I know you're in Pakistan and you've been in the
Yeah,
news in the last
yeah.
8 hours. How are you doing? What's the news?
Uh, Still alive. We were getting drones yesterday, so everyone was outside watching them. So I hope
What were you
everything goes
watching
well.
yesterday? I'm sorry, what were you watching yesterday?
Drones getting
You
shot
were
down.
watching drones?
Getting shot down, yeah. They were in the main city, Lahore. They were found in other cities as well. So I really hope someone de-escalates this because both of the nations are nuclear armed.
Ugh. Well, just thank God
But
you're in space, so you're not in danger.
only for the Zoom meetings.
God bless you. Good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah. Victoria?
Okay, can you hear me? My video gave out. I
Yes, ma'am.
apologize.
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to kind of make a comment, to Arlen's comments and say, everybody is an individual and they all bring something to the table, no matter what their background is. It's kind of like when I was in school and I saw everybody digging through an engineering physics book and they're all looking for the answer. And I'm thinking, but it's not always in there. And that was just kind of my comment that, everybody brings something different to the table. And a lot of researchers and scientists are artists. And that really, really kind of brings a unique process within a process.
That's a fair point. Thank you. And because his ears were ringing, I made sure to reach out to Stephen. We were talking about pitch sync and how you fit into this ecosystem of bringing physician entrepreneurs together with the kinds of folks that we have in our community. And Arlen's told us that you've had a number of conversations that your neighbors, I guess you've met in person. Um, and you shared with us at the meeting where you are in terms of fundraising and build out and the like. Is there anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
Hello, Dr. Myers. Good to see you. And sorry for the background. I'm actually just down at Commons Park right now. So, I would say thank you for getting me on the call. I guess the question would be, what was the conversations really had? Because I came in just about 2 minutes ago, so I apologize.
We were talking about, if I can be so kind, we were
Please.
talking about dating services and matching doctors with non-clinical opportunities.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that we had several conversations about this. I mean, we're like-minded in trying to achieve the objectives. We just have differences in terms of how we should approach that and the challenges.
Yeah.
And I said that I thought the problem with dating, I call them dating services, two-sided market matching platforms, has to do with the quality of the people on them and the preparedness to match such that it is a successful engagement. That was my point. Do you agree or disagree with that?
1000% agree with it. Our process is our platform is not open to the masses. You build a profile, we get your resume, you get your CV, but then we really engage with you further. Most of the people on there have been recommended over to us by other founding physicians that have been involved in the development process. What I realized when I was at Stryker, just down the street from you, is when we developed the Air Plus product, we consulted with over 57 physicians on there. A lot of them only thought about things through the lens of their practice, not the greater good of what was being developed. And so we took that methodology into building our platform. Same with the consultant levels. Our consultants have an average of 18 years of experience. It wasn't open for the masses for two reasons. You're only as good, like you said, as the people on the platform. But also, if you overpopulate the platform, then there's no projects that are being done and people get mad, and then you lose people to just lack of engagement from there. But we've also decided, again, not a big number of physicians on there. Same with the consultants, smaller, hyper-focused. But we did go to find physicians from HS2, which is the consulting arm of Hospital for Special Surgery. And again, a lot of them have just honestly been word of mouth referrals. Dr. David Kay has been phenomenal in really building out a lot of this as well. And as you know, Jeff Cole is great. I can go on and on, but we've been very selective of who we've allowed on. And we talked about earlier, a couple months ago now, there's so many physicians that want to join, but they don't look at things the right way. It's again through the lens of their practice, and there needs to be education on that. And that's something I think we've talked about trying to tackle together, which I'm happy to continue conversations here soon.
No, we'll keep doing it.
Yep, but I agree. It's only as good as the people on the platform, and it cannot be overpopulated population as well, because then people get annoyed at the platform, and then there's just stagnant projects out there that can't find anybody. But I will say May 28th is our launch day for this whole project. So we're getting close. And I'll send out our demo day launch. We're doing about an hour Q&A session, live demo, a lot about the problems, the statistics. It's interesting. On the investor panel, Joe, that you had yesterday, which is phenomenal, all the investors really talked about traction and getting clinician involvement. And the question I really wanted to ask is how many of those investors actually utilize clinicians in their due diligence process? And we did the research and the numbers were extremely sad, but I was really sad. I mean, triangulation off of reports, data, it was maybe 20% at best utilize physicians in the investment process. So,
Do you want to comment on that? You were on that panel.
I'd be happy to. So for our group of the 180 members that we've got that get involved with due diligence, we do have several physicians. And if we have physicians available, we'll pull them in as part of the due diligence. But we do, and occasionally we'll go outside, but we try to keep the due diligence activities within our group.
Yep.
If we don't have an expert in that area, we are less likely to invest in that company.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do, is give you a platform. You can say, oh my gosh, I need a nephrologist that works at the VA that does this, blah, blah, blah. And here's the parameters that you connected with them immediately. And so that's what we're trying to solve for. So you can make a little smarter decisions in the investment process. I enjoyed your take on a lot of the conversations yesterday.
Well,
I appreciate what you brought to the meeting, Stephen. So thank you for coming out and supporting it.
Thank you. It was a great meeting. It was my first one. Sad that it was your last one, but we'll continue to support you.
Thank you. Let's end with a softball question that Nellie asked the group, and that is, what was
I wanted to
everybody?
ask one very quick question though, because you're talking about physicians all the time. I need nurses, sterile techs, nurse practitioners and stuff. Is there a group for that kind of group people?
I have one that I can help you with.
Me
Okay.
too. Yeah, I can help you too.
Yeah.
Well, put your contact information in the chat, everybody who wants to connect there. So to Nellie's closing question for today's call, what was your favorite part? Ice cream is a legitimate answer. If it was ice cream, you can say ice cream.
Legos. Nellie did a great job.
I'm sure she loved
Thank
hearing.
you. Thank you. My favorite part, honestly, was the breakout sessions
What
because the
happened to
intimate.
your camera? Did you shut it off on purpose?
I did. I'm kind of packing up, get ready to go, so I'm multitasking.
Okay.
But I can hear. I'll just put it back on. So my favorite part was honestly just interacting with everybody and hearing what they have to say and the projects they're working on, and just that intimacy that you get. And I think several people have said that a couple of times.
Dan, how about you? Yeah, you. Yeah.
I just enjoyed contacting with people and talking to them and seeing what they were doing and how they were doing it. And I just love learning all the other aspects of medical devices that I hadn't touched with on packaging. And it makes me understand why they think packaging is one of the last things they need to worry about. And it's not. I don't know. I just enjoyed learning and meeting everybody.
I enjoyed finally, because it's very subtle and you really have to listen for it, but I learned how to properly pronounce Haven. There's like an E in there that I didn't know. I was going with a hard high, but it's more of a Haven.
You're really doing. I mean, you could go for a Dutchman.
You think I'm blunt enough?
No, you're not blunt enough.
Really?
Well, you're rude enough, but not blunt enough.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. What better way to conclude this call? And I will be glad to continue to be your chairman emeritus on these calls. You might not see me every week, and I got to go because on my other screen, I got a trade on right now, and it's nicely in the green, and I don't want to fuck it up. So I even today, to symbolize it, I'm wearing a shirt that I got in 2001 when I was short-term VP of marketing for a day trading company. And I got my Series 7 and everything, but that's where I'm going to be hanging out. So if you're anywhere on Wall Street, look me up and maybe we can talk shop. So for Sean Smith, signing off for the last time for MDG Premium, this has been Joe Hage. And we'll see you and Arlen Myers, our featured guests, next week at MLB, MedTech Leading Voice Premium. See you then, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.